We begin with the opening date for that long-awaited Canada-U.S. bridge. After a month of delays and threats from U.S. President Donald Trump, the Gordie Howe International Bridge is finally set to open on July 27th, if everything goes to plan. The Canadian-funded $6.4 billion bridge will connect Windsor and Detroit. And the U.S. agreed to allow the bridge to open after striking a new deal with Canada, that 50% of the toll profits will now go to a U.S. development fund for a period of 15 years, starting when the bridge opens. I'm joined now by Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkins. Mayor Dilkins, good to see you again, sir. Thanks for being here today.
My pleasure, David.
What do you make of this? It looks like yet another concession from Canada to the United States because the U.S. doesn't live up to signed agreements, but we don't know the dollar value or exactly how big it is. What's your assessment on this?
Well, my assessment is that this is a step down for Donald Trump. It allows him to take a win with very little risk for Canada. I suspect for the first 15 years, heck, for the first 30 years, there's going to be very little profit as the vast majority of toll revenue goes to offset the cost of construction, which was the original deal with Michigan to begin with. And so if there's no money to take 50% and put into an economic development fund, well, political talk, the president wins for accepting this deal and making it look like he had a win. And the cost to us as Canadians is likely going to be very, very small.
Very, very small means what, though? I mean, in terms of U.S.-Canada cross-border trade, a $6 billion bridge, are we talking single-digit millions, double-digit millions, hundreds of millions? I have no idea, and the government won't say.
Yeah, I think you have to open the bridge. You have to generate the toll revenue to understand what your business is going to look like. And of course, projections, are saying could take 60%. The Gordie Howe could take 60 to 70% of traffic that's currently crossing at the Ambassador Bridge. But until you actually open the bridge and see where the traffic migrates, you actually won't know. And so, again, the original agreement is that the toll revenue would be used to offset the cost of construction. After the costs of construction were repaid through the collection of tolls, then Michigan and Canada would share the proceeds equally in perpetuity. I don't think there's going to be much to put in Donald Trump's economic development pot for the first 15 years. But again, we won't know until traffic starts crossing the bridge and they start generating some revenue.
I take your point, we won't know with absolute precision, but nobody builds a $6.4 billion bridge without some modeling to give them a sense of where it's going. Certainly in orders of magnitude, they would know now what their construction costs were, what their interest during construction costs were, and have a sense of the level of traffic they'd need to pay that back. So we must have some sense of the order of magnitude, Mayor Dilkins, on what it is they're giving to the United States here.
You know, there may be modeling. I'm sure they've done the math on the Canadian side of the equation here. What I'm more interested in, though, David, is what's unspoken here. And clearly this delay in opening was driven by, of course, what was reported as the owner of the privately owned Ambassador Bridge, meeting with Secretary Lutnick, and then 2 hours later, there's a Truth Social post by President Trump saying the bridge is not going to be allowed to open. I'm more curious about what's going to happen with the Ambassador Bridge and what deal, if any, was made behind the scenes to figure out that part of the equation, because quite honestly, when the Gordie Howe Bridge opens and the Ambassador Bridge loses 50, 60, or 70% of their business, they no longer have a viable business based on the math. And so something's going to have to be done because it was never anticipated that the Ambassador Bridge would be taken out. We need that crossing for redundancy. It has to be part of the ecosystem here, and it has to be able to somehow be funded. And so we'll figure out what that looks like moving forward. I hope that there were some discussions about that behind the scenes because we need to make sure there's stability in that operation as well.
Well, that's an interesting point, and one that maybe only the Maroon family and the Trump administration can answer the question of, and I don't think either are going to be on this show anytime soon, Mayor Dilkins. I wonder, though, there's the other restriction that's in this deal, and look, we have asked the government to come on and explain this. No one was available. We've asked them to give us numbers. They say they're working on it, but we do not know how the math works. But there's the profit share and whatever that is, but then there's also giving the U.S. some sort of veto and consultation role on any toll changes greater than 10% in either direction on the new bridge. I mean, what do you make of that level of engagement that they're giving the Trump administration here?
I think that's a free give. I mean, I think that means absolutely nothing. And I say that as the chair of the Windsor-Detroit Tunnel. The city of Windsor is a half owner in the tunnel that connects Windsor and Detroit. And so I understand toll increases. We understand the operation. And it's very unusual to say you're going to increase costs more than 10% anyway at any given time. And so I think that's a give with no risk at all on the Canadian side. Again, Donald Trump can take a win looking like he got a deal from Mark Carney, but operationally, I think it means almost nothing.
Okay, just before we continue, Mayor Dilkins, I have to let the audience know, apparently there's a broadcast issue somewhere in Toronto. Our audio is getting out. Our video is not getting out. So you're hearing this conversation. Radio has not taken over CBC News Network. You can't see me and the mayor. We're both bald men in blue suits, though he's not wearing his glasses this time. So you can picture it that way. All right. So you think this is a lot of just free give. Do you think this is why maybe the Carney administration, the Carney government, excuse me, they're not being completely forthcoming with some of the details because maybe the dollar amounts are actually so small in the big scheme of things, they don't want the narrative to be that Trump opened a bridge for nothing? Do you think there's a bit of self-defense being played?
Well, there's no doubt. And I think, at the end of the day, when you read between the lines here, when you look at the language, in the agreements, in the press conference or the press release, rather, from the Prime Minister's office and Donald Trump's Truth Social post, there's some well-crafted political language here that I think, knowing Donald Trump and the way he operates, I think it's fair to say he needed a way to be able to get a win. He got a win from Canada, but as a Canadian and as a taxpayer in Canada, I'm not worried about the amount that he's getting. I think it's immaterial in the grand equation. And I think good on the Prime Minister for coming up and finding a way to get this bridge open because it had to happen. Okay,
Mayor Dilkins, and happy until the video's back so you can see both of us in all of our glory here. So thank God for that. But look, on this, if this goes ahead on July 27th, and that's a big if because, we're learning each and every day that signed agreements don't necessarily mean much. What will this mean for your city? Because I know it makes it easier for traffic to get across the border, creates productivity and shortens economic distance for shipments. But is there a spin-off that you're going to feel in Windsor, for example?
Well, it's great for the regional economy, and that's Windsor and Detroit, being our respective auto capitals of our countries. Our entire industry down here, that's the auto industry and the parts sector, operates on a just-in-time delivery basis. So the day the Gordie Howe Bridge opens, David, it will be the most technologically, most seamless way to cross the land border between the United States and Canada. And it's also, the beauty is here, it's direct highway-to-highway connection. And so when you'll get off the 401, you'll get right on the I-75, and you can go wherever you have to go in either direction. Right now, getting to the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor, you get off the 401, but you have to go through 7 different traffic lights before you get to the entrance or the exit of the Ambassador Bridge. And so it will be the most seamless way to cross, the most technologically advanced way to cross. And I am confident that you're going to see a huge amount of traffic divert there simply because it's going to save time, which is saving money in the trucking world.
Just as a final point, Mayor Dilkins, obviously it's good for industry that this bridge is opening, right? It's good for trade. I mean, this is not meant to be a money maker so much as a wealth creator, but for all the reasons you've outlined. But here we are with yet again another deal that isn't necessarily being honored. And we don't know where the broader trade negotiations are going to go between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. But this pattern, I mean, how worried are you that it's just going to be tough, especially now that they've agreed not to renew it and want to keep doing the annual review, negotiation on trade, that this is just kind of what we're in for as long as this administration is in power in the U.S.?
Regretfully, that's the partner you have to operate with, which speaks to the complexity that our Prime Minister and team have to figure out how to deal with a guy who has a comprehensive trade agreement, who said it was the best trade agreement of his time when Donald Trump negotiated the first time, and then cherry picks steel, aluminum, auto, dairy. He cherry picks all the different items out of that comprehensive agreement and tries to leverage his own position to get gains and advancements on his side. And so, regretfully, it's certainly not the type of partner I think that we wish we had, but it's the one we do have and we have to figure out how to deal with. And I'm still incredibly optimistic and hopeful that when it comes to CUSMA, USMCA, that a pathway will be found, that we will find a way to harmonize, even more tightly together if it is that Fortress North America concept, because we have so much more to gain if we don't do that, or we have so much more to lose, rather. We have more to gain if we do that. It would be terribly regretful. And I think the United States would feel it. I mean, I think the residents there, they're going to feel it more than they're feeling it today in terms of inflation and the pain points on the price of autos, driven almost entirely by tariffs imposed by Donald Trump on Canada.
Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkins, we always appreciate the time, sir. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, David.
In a letter to the minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade, several Conservative MPs wrote, Prime Minister Carney has negotiated a terrible deal for Canada. And amongst their list of demands from Minister Dominic LeBlanc was a request to immediately release the full agreement, including all amendments, side letters, financial arrangements, and commitments to the United States. Shuvaloy Majumdar is the Conservative MP for Calgary Heritage and the Conservative Canada-U.S. Relations critic. Shuvaloy Majumdar, good to see you again, sir. Thanks for some time today.
Good to see you too.
So this deal, there are still many things we do not know about the dollar amounts. The Prime Minister insists it's a good deal for Canada. Your letter, you call it a terrible deal. How do we draw conclusions at this point?
There's a matter of transparency that I think the Canadian public deserves to understand exactly what's being negotiated. We haven't seen anything about side letters or side agreements that might be associated with the deal. We don't know exactly how the deal will work. We don't know who will govern the economic development agency that is referred to in this deal. What authority has been granted to the United States over toll rates? Will they have the opportunity to block or expand toll rates moving forward? There's a lot of questions that I think are fair questions, fair-minded questions for the government to be transparent about before opening the bridge in full. And so we've only been getting a drip and drab of all of that coming out. And, for the auto workers, lumber workers, steel workers, and aluminum workers who are putting their goods on that bridge and are looking for economic certainty. Certainly the opening of the bridge is a moment of Canadian pride. It's long been coming. It was a project that started many years ago and I think is important to the future of our economy.
Yeah, what we do know at this point is it's set to open, and of course it's been scheduled to open before, on July 27th, and that's when the 15-year clock on whatever this agreement is, that's when it begins. That's what I'm told. Now, it is half of the profits for that 15 years, not total revenues, just profits. And what the Prime Minister has said is, that's after operating costs, salaries, paying back some of the capital, some of the interest. So there might be 5, 6, 7 years where there really isn't a profit, and that will cut into the actual value of the concession to the Americans. Do you buy that assessment? Does that make sense to you based on how a lot of mega projects and infrastructure projects would work?
The concession that would be provided is, it's a part of clarity that we need, but more importantly, it's a concession. Like, what did we get for this entire negotiation more widely? Here we are sitting as a government and a country negotiating a bridge that Canada paid for, that we now need American permission to open, to have access and to fulfill the deal. But more widely, the Gordie Howe Bridge rests alongside a long list of concessions that have been made by this Prime Minister over the last 15 months on the DST, on the Netflix tax, on defense spending, on the Gordie Howe Bridge, I can go on and on. These are all piecemeal issues that belong as part of a wider negotiation that Canada should be having for North America, for the United States, that span our economic and security interests. For 15 months, we watched the Prime Minister gallivant around the world on a range of pet projects, whether it's partnering more closely with Beijing or organizing middle powers in Europe against America, but then reverse course to say that, we need to build a fortress North America, that integration actually is important and not subordination, and now these individual issues. I'm wondering what Canadians are actually getting for all of this after 15 months of the Prime Minister's approach. Well, in that, I'd like to understand what we got from the Gordie Howe Bridge.
Well, I think what seems clear to me is that what Canada gets is the bridge opens, right? Because this is another agreement. No. Look, I'm not saying it is. This is another agreement, and it was Stephen Harper's government that did the bridge agreement that the U.S. has reneged on. And insisted on some sort of reopening and a change in terms because the bridge does land on the U.S. side and customs is controlled by the federal government, even though the partnership's with Michigan. And they use that leverage to extract this concession, whatever it is. Now, I've tried to get a sense of the dollar amount, at least the order of magnitude of what the profit sharing could be. And as we are having this conversation, I have no clarity on that. So it's one of three conclusions. They don't know, which I think is unlikely. It's so big they don't want to say because it's embarrassing, or it's not that meaningful and they don't want to say because they don't want to antagonize the president. It's got to be somewhere in that range of options, it seems to me. But it doesn't seem like we got anything except the bridge is opening at the end of the month.
I agree with you. We didn't get anything for this, and that's my big concern. I had been an advisor to Stephen Harper and John Baird in the time that this bridge had been negotiated. The relationship with the United States that Canada holds is a wide-ranging and very complex relationship of many issues, spanning our entire economies and our security framework. What we have seen in the last decade or so is the emergence of China and its weaponization of commercial relationships, which have profound consequences for our energy, our infrastructure, our investment, and our security posture. Now, CUSMA, through successive American administrations, Republican and Democrat, and the Congress, has been principally about how we manage our security and our prosperity in this context. And in that, the negotiation approach that Canada needed to bring to Washington when it came to something as vital to our future as CUSMA and tariffs and these individual issues like the Gordie Howe Bridge are, needs to sit back and say there's a wide array of issues that are the Canadian interest.
Right.
And on those interests, we need to sit across the table from Washington and come to a wider deal. The longer we dilly-dally and dawdle around on these issues and not come to an actual agreement on how Canada will survive and succeed in North America, the more vulnerable we will be to ad hoc negotiations like we've seen the one imposed on the Gordie Howe Bridge. I mean, the Prime Minister has our sympathy for dealing with an unpredictable and tough negotiator in Washington. He does not have our sympathy from not having been serious about the success of Canadian workers over the last 15 months.
But what evidence is there that Canada is the one dilly-dallying on this, Mr. Majumdar? Because if you look at everyone who came to an agreement with Trump at some point, those have been reneged, altered, changed, at least once, if not multiple times. You know, a court in the United States today rejected an agreement that, an out-of-court settlement that President Trump had with the IRS, accusing him of essentially self-dealing with his own government to get rich, and has referred his lawyers to the bar in Florida for discipline. I mean, this is not a normal administration that any government is dealing with globally. They seem to be the problem on a global level. So why would it be Canada that is the problem here?
Well, look, even on something as recently as a week ago, we've seen that the Canadians, that Mark Carney did not send the kind of representation we needed to on forced labor products. You know, conservatives have been raising this issue for years, that we have deep concerns about forced labor products, particularly from...
But the question was, what evidence is there Canada is the problem in the broader negotiations with the U.S.?
You asked for dilly-dallying. Yeah, you're asking why we're dilly-dallying. So here's a major tariff issue on supply chains for forced labor products that Canada barely wrote a note and sent in an incomplete note rather than an actual representative like the Mexicans and the Peruvians did. Here's some big decisions Canada could have been making to build incentives and great leverage for our country's future. The first is to establish, as Pierre Poilievre has suggested, a strategic reserve of NATO-grade critical minerals and for energy security in the world. The second is to unlock our resources through removing anti-development, anti-pipeline, anti-shipping legislation to cancel the industrial carbon tax. And this is important because we are talking about trillions of dollars of Canadian commodity strength that should be shovel-ready and approved within 6 months and capable of being able to access international markets, including the United States. We should be rebuilding our auto pact with the United States when it comes to our auto workers with Auto Pact 2.0, which would increase production. We should be advancing our defense industrial base. We have seen that there are massive shortages of the kinds of things that defend the free world, and Canada ought to be a major producer. These are all domestic decisions that build strength and give us the opportunity to engage not just America, but the world with strength.
Right.
None of those decisions have been made. That's where this government has been dilly-dallying. And even during CUSMA negotiations, we have seen a liberal minister after liberal minister from industry to heritage go to Beijing to negotiate God knows what, instead of going to Houston, Florida, New York, Los Angeles. So I know exactly what a serious negotiation should look like, and that's not what we've seen in 15 months.
Okay, but again, that is an assessment of what your priorities would be versus what their priorities seem to be, not that...
I think our priorities, the priorities of the Canadian worker, right? Like,
I understand, but my question was about what evidence is there that Canada is the problem here? Because all of the public evidence on basically every big issue on earth right now that involves the Americans seems to be that it's their use of their leverage and their economic dominance against their historic allies is the issue. everywhere.
Well, look at how many times in North America our friends in Mexico have been engaging Washington on a range of issues, from Chinese products in their markets to securing their borders from criminal
Sure,
cartels.
but they have a different structure of economy. They've been a bigger transshipment point.
We're repeating the same mistake, David, that the Trudeau cabinet did, which is still the same one that staffs Prime Minister Carney, which is that we're allowing America and Mexico to come to terms on what a North American deal should look like, and then impose that on Canada. That was the bad deal we got last time with Justin Trudeau, and the same cabinet is advising this Prime Minister to do the same thing. We have seen a wait-and-see approach from Ottawa, as opposed to a build strength and engage approach that Conservatives are offering. And for 15 months, that's unconscionable, because I'm the one who has to talk to auto workers, lumber workers, aluminum workers, look them in their eyes and explain why they have so much anxiety and uncertainty about their future.
Okay, Shuvaloy Majumdar, we're out of time. If I do get more information on the tolls, we'll have you back.
Transparency is great. We love it.
I'm trying, man. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. That's Shuvaloy Majumdar, the Canada-U.S. trade critic for the Conservatives. Thank you, sir.
Good to be with you.